Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, get ready, because today we are plunging into something, well, really extraordinary.
Definitely out there.
Yeah, we're exploring a whole cosmology
Yeah.
from the early 20th century. It's this esoteric framework that tries to weave together philosophy, their idea of science and spirituality, in ways that, well, they'll probably challenge how you think about things. Our source material. It's a collection of writings by a figure named Harold W. Percival. These were originally in The Word magazine, way back early 1900s. We picked these specifically for you, the listener, because they really lay out this incredibly intricate view of reality.
That's right. And these texts, they don't hold back. They tackle the absolute biggest questions you can think of.
Like what?
You know, the nature of existence itself, what consciousness is, life, death, destiny. But the perspective is, well, it's profoundly different from how most of us think about these things today. So our mission here is basically to guide you through this pretty dense material. We want to pull out the core insights, the really surprising concepts, and show you how it all kind of fits together in his system.
Think of this as your shortcut, your essential guide. We'll highlight the most fascinating bits, connect the dots for you, and give you the essence of this really unique viewpoint without you having to wade through, all the original dense texts. Let's dive in.
Okay, so the absolute foundation, the starting point for everything in this system, is something called substance.
Substance.
Think of it as the ultimate source, kind of undifferentiated, pure potential, maybe. And from this substance, everything else we experience, it differentiates, it separates out.
And what does it separate into?
Into what these sources call spirit matter.
Spirit matter, not spirit and matter.
Exactly, that's key. It's the fundamental duality, these two inseparable poles that are in absolutely everything, everywhere. It's not a conflict, spirit versus matter. It's spirit matter.
Okay, so how should we picture that relationship then?
Well, imagine matter is the passive side of substance. It's the part that gets moved, gets shaped. Spirit is the active side. It moves, it energizes, it shapes the matter.
Okay. Like energy and form. One's doing the moving, the other's being moved.
That's a pretty good analogy, yeah. And they talk about different levels or densities of the spirit matter. They use the term removes.
Removes.
Yeah. So the first remove from pure substance is spirit. Our physical matter, the stuff we interact with daily, that's the seventh remove. It's the most differentiated, the densest. But the crucial point, really, is that everything from, a gas to a rock to us, it's all just spirit matter in different states. Different degrees of consciousness, essentially.
Which brings us neatly to the big why, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The purpose of all this, these universes, these cycles.
Yes. The grand purpose, according to Percival, is the attainment of consciousness, capital C. The whole cosmic show exists, and I'm quoting here roughly, in order that matter may be worked up from the most simple and undeveloped state to the highest possible degree of intelligence. From a grain of sand to an archangel or the universal nameless deity.
Wow. That's quite a journey. But wait, if consciousness is the goal, does consciousness itself change along the way?
Good question. That's a key distinction they make. Consciousness itself, it's described as changeless.
Okay.
What does change, what evolves, is the vehicle through which consciousness expresses itself, the matter, the form. These vehicles get transformed, moving from lower to higher degrees of awareness.
So spiritual development is really about transforming the vehicle.
Precisely. It is this transformation of matter. And the kind of counterintuitive takeaway here is that real attainment isn't about clinging to any specific body or form you might have. It's about valuing that vehicle only as the means, the tool, to reach higher states of consciousness.
Interesting. Don't get attached to the form itself.
Right. Value it for its purpose. Now, within this whole system of evolving consciousness through these vehicles, the sources paint a really unique picture of evolutionary history.
Okay.
They talk about vast time periods, rounds, distinct races of humanity, and they link this whole progression to the zodiac. They see the zodiac as a kind of governing law for evolution. They even suggest wise men in the past could literally read the history of man in the zodiac.
Okay, this is where, from our modern view, the description starts sounding pretty fantastical, right? These early races, they don't sound very human.
Not at all. The first race, described as crystal-like spheres of breath, linked to the sign Cancer, more like energy patterns than solid bodies. And importantly, they did not die, as did the races which followed.
Crystal spheres of breath.
Okay.
And after them.
The second race, associated with Leo, these emerged from the first, described as opalescent oval or egg-like forms.
Like formed.
Yeah. And their way of perpetuating was also strange. They had sort of put forth another form like themselves and then merged back into it, disappearing into their own offspring.
Huh. Okay. And the third race, linked to Virgo.
They condensed from those egg forms. And these were double-sexed, a man and woman in one body. And these third race beings started generating new forms initially, believe it or not, from the umbilicus, like vaporous forms.
This is double-sexed, generating forms from the navel.
Wow. So how do we get from that to, well, us?
Right, there's a critical split, a transition within that third race. Some of these early beings, the sources say, were somehow enveloped by those original crystal spheres from the first race, and these became the imperishable, undying race who remain as the instructors of mankind.
The immortal instructors.
Exactly. The others, though, they started to experience death, but they reappeared in their progeny. Their bodies gradually became denser, the sexes separated fully, which eventually led to the union of two distinct sexes to produce humanity as we currently understand it. So in this whole evolutionary map, where do we fit in? Present-day humanity.
According to Percival, we are primarily the fifth race. Our main characteristic is desire, and we're linked to Scorpio. But, and this is important, we're currently inhabiting and operating through the physical body structure developed by the fourth race.
The fourth race.
Yeah, associated with sex in Libra, but it's dynamic. The principles for the next race is the sixth race, which is thought, Sagittarius, and the seventh IMI, Capricorn. These principles are already present within us, within our current fourth race bodies. They're developing, waiting to become the dominant modes for future beings.
And connecting this back to you, the listener, there's this really striking idea here. Your physical body right now actually preserves the memory, the forms of this entire history we've just described.
Right. That original sphere shape of the first race, it's represented by your head.
My head is a crystal sphere of breath.
Metaphorically, yes. It contains the idea and images of all the forms and organs in the rest of your body. Your whole body is presented as a miniature universe, even having its own internal zodiac reflecting the macrocosm. It's a fascinating thought, your own physical form holding the blueprint of this vast cosmic history.
That is fascinating. Okay, let's shift from the grand scale to the inner world. According to this system, we don't just live in the physical world, do we?
Not at all. We exist and pass through multiple interconnected worlds simultaneously. There's the physical, then the psychic, the mental, and the spiritual. And these aren't like separate dimensions far away. They surround, penetrate, and bear up this physical world, which is seen as the densest, kind of the lowest, and the sediment.
And each world has its own challenges.
Yes, each presents its own set of illusions that we need to wake up from to see through.
And our main tools for perceiving any of this are our senses, right? They're called the interpreters of the universe, to the eye, our core self.
Correct. But here's a crucial distinction they make. We're not supposed to be just the loyal slave of our senses, passively receiving input, even if we're very cultured about it. The I, our conscious self, needs to learn their language of interpretation and use them as such.
Use them as tools, not be ruled by them.
Exactly. Don't let them dictate your whole reality. And here's where it gets really, really strange. A detail you just don't find elsewhere. The sources claim the senses themselves are actually elementals.
Elementals like nature spirits.
Yeah.
Inside me.
Sort of. They describe them as actual beings within us. Humanized, impersoned aspects of an element. There's a light elemental for seeing, a sound elemental for hearing, a water elemental for taste, an earth elemental for smell.
Wow.
And touch is described as still kind of forming fully. So think about it, when you see something, it's not just physics. According to this, it's an elemental being inside you, interpreting the world through light.
That's a completely different way to think about perception. So if our senses are these beings or tools, how does the I, the self, become conscious of itself amidst all this?
The path is described as a mental process of elimination. And it fundamentally starts by quieting those senses, learning not to be constantly pulled around by their input.
And what about the physical body in this inner picture? Is it just a machine?
Well, the sources have a surprising take here, too. They suggest the physical body is actually little more than the shadow of its form.
A shadow.
Yeah, or even a shadow thrown into matter by the light of the minds of men. It's seen as a reflection, a shadow of an invisible inner form that holds the physical cells together. Studying shadows, they suggest, helps understand the true value or lack thereof of physical things, because the physical is seen as comparatively as unreal and as fleeting as a shadow.
So the real body is the inner form, and the physical is just its shadow. That's radical.
It really is. Now, operating alongside these senses within the mental world are what they call mental faculties.
Okay, what are those?
They list things like light, time, image, focus, dark, motive, and crucially, I am. These are inherent parts of us, but we often use them, immaturely. The I am faculty is super important. It's what gives us our sense of identity or permanence, the ability to reflect on ourselves.
And how do we develop these faculties, make them work better?
The key is exercising the focus faculty. Developing and adjusting these inner tools, especially that I am power in its light aspect, happens through disciplined focus. This practice is what allows the individual, the disciple on this path, to learn respecting the knowledge of the worlds in which or through which they operate. It opens up awareness beyond the purely physical.
Right, so focus trains the mind to perceive these other realities.
Exactly. And this leads us right into a core concept. The power of the mind, or manas as they call it, the power of thought, and how this inner world directly creates our destiny. The mind is described as essentially a being who thinks. It exists in its own mental world and knows things similar to itself.
And thought itself, where does that come from?
Thought is generated by the contact of mind with the physical body. It's what really distinguishes man from the lower worlds.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, maybe a bit alarming. Thoughts aren't just abstract things in this system, are they?
Not at all. According to these writings, thoughts are like children of the mind. They are described as fully formed entities.
Entities, like little beings I create?
Pretty much, yeah. Energetic beings. And the mind, their parent, is responsible for them. They have a life cycle. They're born from the interaction of mind and desire. They draw energy, sustenance from you, their creator.
Oh.
And like kids wanting attention, they return in cycles, triggered by a related feeling or situation. If you entertain the thought when it returns, dwell on it, feed an emotion, you refresh it, give it more energy, and it goes off again.
And if I ignore it or refuse it?
If you refuse it, it weakens, it loses energy. Though they say it will likely return on its next cycle, perhaps weaker.
Okay, so how does this connect to my actual life, my experiences?
This is the absolute crucial link to destiny. These thoughts, especially the ones you habitually entertain and feed with desire and attention, they accumulate, solidify, crystallize, and become physical forms, acts, and events in your life.
They become events.
Yes, they literally determine the destinies of the future lives of their creator. They even solidify, crystallize into the astral design form, the energetic blueprint for your next reincarnation, carrying all the tendencies from your past.
Ooh, hold on. So are you saying my whole life, my future lives, everything is just predetermined by my past thoughts? Is there no wiggle room? Is destiny totally fixed?
It's not quite fixed by some external god or fate. The sources emphasize that destiny is like the balance sheet. Yes, it's the sum total compiled from your own desire, thought, knowledge, wisdom, will from your previous life or even evolutionary period. Your time and place of birth, your environment, your body's tendencies, these aren't random. They are the record, the account of your past actions and thoughts.
Okay, the balance sheet. But then is there any freedom? Can I change what's on that sheet? Any escape?
Yes, and this is absolutely key. The choice, the freedom, lies in the manner in which he accepts and uses his destiny.
How so?
Well, you can just passively abandon himself to the suggestions of his inheritance, right? Just let the old patterns, the old karma, run the show. Or you can consciously accept them as suggestions for what they are worth and determine to change them.
Ah, so I can choose how to react to the balance sheet.
Exactly. This system insists really strongly that each human being has the right and power of choice. The only real limit to changing your destiny, they say, is your own ignorance of these inner laws and how they work.
That brings up the relationship between will and desire. How do they fit together?
Desire is usually seen as being behind will, the basic driving force. But for someone actively trying to progress to gain consciousness, the ideal is that above desire stands will.
Will controls desire.
Right. And true freedom, they argue, comes from intuitively feeling that your will is free. If you believe your destiny is dictated by someone else's will, or even by your own uncontrollable desires, you stay bound. You stay enslaved to natural impulse through desire.
Okay. What about something simpler, like just wishing for something, does that actually do anything?
According to these sources, wishing is a powerful internal process with real external potential. It starts usually with your senses sparking a desire. Then, if your spiritual self, your higher awareness, doesn't veto it based on inner laws, your thinking faculty gets involved.
Okay.
Your mind then acts on what they call life matter, shaping it into the form that your desire is craving. This creates an intangible thought form. Then your desire pulls on this form. And here's the kicker. If your thought and desire are persistent and strong enough, and if the karma of other people aligns, you can actually compel them, draw them into the situation to help bring your wish into physical reality.
Compel others.
Yeah, the physical object or situation you wished for is literally the end result, the crystallization of that whole internal cycle of wishing.
That makes wishing sound much more active and consequential than just daydreaming. Now, what about doubt? That seems like a major obstacle.
Huge obstacle. Doubt is described as deep-seated in the mind. It's even called synonymous with one of the mind's own functions, the function of darkness, sleep. It's seen as a primary cause of suffering and a massive block to progress.
And the worst kind of doubt.
The most serious, the most damaging doubt, according to Percival, is doubting that your own mind, the one living in your body right now, is the same in essence with the immortal mind and with the universal mind. That doubt cuts you off from your own deeper nature and potential.
Okay, let's tackle some really big concepts that get a unique spin here. Karma, heaven, and hell. You mentioned karma isn't external punishment.
Right. It's not fate imposed from outside. And crucially, in this system, the existence of accident and chance is impossible.
No accidents at all. So when something looks like an accident,
it's just a visible segment of an otherwise invisible circle of events. That circle originates entirely from your own past, knowledge, motive, thought, desire, and action. It's all self-generated. And every time one of these karmic circles completes, it's not the end, it's the beginning of another circle of events. It forms this long spiral chain through your lives.
And what part of me carries this karmic baggage, this spiral chain, from one life to the next?
That's the real I, the individuality, your deeper self. It carries the sum total of the thoughts and actions of a life over to the next life and to the next, constantly updating that karmic balance sheet until, theoretically, perfection is reached.
Did the sources give specific examples of how this karma works out?
Yes, they did. For instance, the money miser, someone whose sole focus is accumulating wealth. Their karma leads to suffering because they can't actually enjoy the wealth. They become callous, deaf to others' pain, and end up dying miserably.
Any others?
They talk about psychic karma, getting involved with psychic phenomena, mediumship, seances, before you're properly developed and grounded. This can make you a slave of that world, you lose control, and can end up a moral and physical wreck.
That sounds serious.
It is. They also mention wasting sexual energy on the psychic plane, which leads to a loss of spiritual power. Conversely, conserving and transmuting that energy helps control passions and desires and can even help you acquire new mental faculties.
Okay, let's shift to heaven and hell. Are these actual places we go after we die? Like with pearly gates or fire pits?
No, definitely not physical places. The sources are very clear. Heaven and hell are states of mind, states of consciousness.
So what is hell then, in this view?
Hell is defined as a state of suffering of the mind in its effort to overcome its own ignorance, to gain self-mastery and knowledge. You enter this state when you act against the underlying law, usually by seeking more and more intense pleasure until it inevitably flips into suffering.
And trying to escape the suffering just makes it worse.
Exactly. Trying to escape the penalty with more pleasure just keeps you bound in that chain of debts, forged by thoughts and deeds, held tight by your ruling desire, which they call the devil. Fighting against your own desires just intensifies the suffering, the fires. Yielding brings remorse, regret, agony.
Is there a way out?
Standing firm against the desire, even though it leads to pain and emptiness and an absence of light, allows the mind to realize it can stand all tests. That's the path through it.
Okay. And heaven, if it's not a place, what is it?
Heaven is also a state previously prepared for itself by your own mind. It's built during life when you manage to put aside sensual desires and negative thoughts, focusing instead on your ideals and aspirations.
So I build my own heaven.
Precisely. Each one builds his own heaven. It's made entirely of your highest thoughts and ideals from life, which you then experience fully in this state between lives after the mind leaves the physical body. You wouldn't perceive physical earth from there. There's no walking, flying, eating, none of that. It's purely a mental state built from your own consciousness.
So this whole cycle, birth, death, then death, birth into the next life, just keeps going, like a wheel we're stuck on.
Exactly like a wheel. It's kept turning by what they call the perennial invisible germ of physical life. This little spark persists, acts as the link, and furnishes the idea or blueprint for the next body. So, at physical birth, the reincarnating ego is born into the flesh and dies from its place in the world of the soul.
Dies from the soul world to be born here.
Right. And then at physical death, the breath goes out, and the actor retires to brood over his deeds and motives in the play, preparing for the next act. Percival says we tend to alternately praise and abuse this wheel, but ultimately we hug it closely all the while.
Is there any way off the wheel, according to this?
Yes, there is. Immortality is possible, they say, while still living in the physical body. It's achieved through spiritual development and spiritual birth, a process they describe as being analogous to how a fetus develops. So not after death, but through transformation in life.
Wow. Okay. Now let's get into some other types of beings mentioned in these writings. Elementals and ghosts. These sound different.
They are. The sources state very directly that elementals are actual beings, even acknowledging this might seem strange. They're associated with the four elements fire, air, water, earth. And interestingly, they're described as the very powers which produce and which cure the disease.
So elementals are directly linked to health and illness in this system.
Yes, that's the idea. And
Yeah,
you
right.
wouldn't find these with a microscope or anything. They're perceived, the sources say, by people who are close to nature, or through magic, or by natural psychics. There's even this concept that the ultimate goal of nature itself is to evolve into a human elemental.
And these elementals, can they be controlled or directed?
Yes, through practices often termed magic, they can supposedly be directed to heal diseases or for massive engineering feats like breaking and moving huge rocks, think ancient temples, or reshaping landscapes.
Seriously.
That's what the texts claim. Also, achieving flight, creating precious stones, prophecy, invisibility. They can even be bound to inanimate objects, making a broom sweep by itself or a boat move. And disturbingly, they mention their use in warfare. Elemental soldiers, creating a fire cloud, a bolt of lightning.
It's a lot. Now, ghosts, these are described as different from elementals, right?
Yeah.
And they're different kinds.
Correct. First, there are physical ghosts. These are said to linger near decaying physical bodies, like in cemeteries. But they're described as basically empty automatons, completely without will or motive of their own.
So, not dangerous.
Generally not. They can't really do anything unless a living person somehow gives them energy, their magnetism. Then they might whisper or echo past sounds. People might see them, sometimes in postures reflecting old habits, walking, sitting, looking thoughtful. Very passive.
Okay, that's less scary than usual ghost stories. What about ghosts linked to desire?
Ugh. Now these are different. There are desire ghosts of living men. These are created when a living person focuses intensely on a desire, giving it mental form and energy, essentially sending it out into the psychic world.
I create my own desire ghosts.
Yes, and while you might be able to control it, often these things return to haunt, ravish, and destroy their makers. Or they might prey like wild beasts upon their victims. For example, nurturing a secret vice is described as literally creating a monster that feeds on you or others.
Yikes. Okay. And desire ghosts of dead men.
After physical death, a strong desire can hold the thought ghost for a while, eventually becoming a distinct desire form. These entities then try to feed by influencing living people through similar desires, sex, cruelty, greed, or just by attaching to their personal atmosphere. Strong ones might even appear fairly well defined in outline.
Can you get rid of them? Like if someone is obsessed?
The sources say it takes immense determination, especially for strong ones like those plaguing a drug addict or someone consumed by vice. Lesser ones, born from sudden strong emotions like hatred or jealousy, are supposedly weaker. You can drive them out by turning the light of reason on them. They apparently wriggle, squirm under the light, ooze out as a muculent mass, and simply cannot stay in the light.
Ooze out.
Lovely.
Lovely. And the last type, thought ghosts.
These aren't the active thought itself, but more like the empty shell of the original thought. They can be collective, related to family patterns, racial beliefs, national ideas, or even ideas from a whole historical age, like concepts of honor, pride, war, religious dogmas. There's a distinction made between the thought ghost of a living versus a dead person, similar to the physical ghost.
So the big picture here is that elementals and these various ghosts are considered real forces, real beings in this cosmology, actively influencing things like disease, healing, maybe even large-scale events.
Exactly. They're not just metaphors. They're presented as active players in the physical and psychic realms.
Okay, so Given this complex universe with all these forces and laws, what's the ultimate potential for a human being? Where can this evolution lead?
It leads, according to these writings, to the state achieved by beings known as adepts, masters, and mahatmas. They aren't myths. They are the logical sequence and results of repeated reincarnations, the outcome of gaining greater knowledge of life and of the laws of life. They function as conscious, intelligent agents of the universal law.
And there's a clear progression, like levels of attainment.
Yes, definitely. An adept primarily acts with forms and desires. They learn to transform these, using their knowledge to grow beyond the limitations of the body.
Okay.
Advancing further, controlling desires more fully, transforming forms consciously, they gain deeper knowledge of thought and can enter consciously into the world of thought. This is a master. A master deals with life and thoughts, directing life through thought, not just ordinary human thinking.
And the highest level mentioned.
That's the Mahatma. They rise into the spiritual world and become an immortal, intelligent, and individualized mind. A Mahatma deals with ideas, which are seen as the underlying realities behind ideals.
Right. Now, the sources mentioned these beings often live in remote places, caves, mountains, deserts, because they avoid the disorder, wrongdoing, discord, and impure physical bodies of dense populations. But they also warn that just living in a cave doesn't make you an adept, right?
Absolutely crucial point. Many hermits or fanatics live in such places. You wouldn't recognize an adept, master, or Mahatma by their clothes or location.
So how would you recognize them, can you?
Again, the recognition comes through your own inner development. You'd recognize an adept by your own growing ability to feel and sense your own form, body, and direct your desires. It's not about seeing them do magic tricks or teleporting. You'd recognize a master by your own developing ability to dream consciously and intelligently in his waking moments, and while still conscious in his physical body. A master's body is said to be made of thought, allowing them control over time. Their heaven is the mental world, where all humanity's thoughts and ideals reside.
And a Mahatma.
By your own knowledge body, your true individuality, it's described as being in nature similar to the Mahatma body. So it's an internal resonance, a recognition of like by like, not an external observation.
Interesting. The recognition is internal. Now, they also distinguish between types of attainment, right? Selfish versus wise.
Yes, a very important distinction. It's possible, they say, to achieve a kind of immortality selfishly by mastering matter but mistaking its changing forms for the ultimate reality. This leads to knowledge without wisdom and eventually ends in the nirvana of annihilation, dissolution.
And the wise path.
The wise path involves achieving immortality by seeing the underlying sameness in all things, balancing the principles of time and matter across all the worlds. This allows one to conquer death, space, eliminate selfishness and the sense of separateness, see their fundamental unity with all humanity, and then dedicate themselves to assisting others on their path. This is the Mahatma, who becomes a guide and ruler of humanity, often working as part of a larger brotherhood.
Okay, finally, the sources give some practical advice for aspirants, people trying to follow this path. Let's touch on a few. Food, for instance. Any special diet required?
The advice is surprisingly down to earth. Don't get obsessed with food fads. The main goal is a strong and healthy body to do the work. Eat what maintains your health and strength. They even point to human anatomy, carnivorous teeth, stomach structure suggesting a natural need for both meat and fruits, vegetables. They basically say no amount of sentimentality nor theories will overcome such facts.
Practical. What about becoming a disciple of a master?
If you're a self-appointed disciple, meaning you're working on yourself earnestly, they advise against joining groups that limit your thinking or demand adherence to their specific beliefs. And crucially, you must not control another before he can control himself. Self-control takes so much focus, you won't have time or energy to boss others around. You might pursue this path for many lifetimes without any formal recognition as a disciple.
Humbling. What about flying? Is that actually possible?
It's discussed as theoretically possible, yes. Either by making the physical body lighter than air and inducing the motive force of flight, described as incredibly difficult, requiring intense mental control and focus, or perhaps with wing-like attachments, still needing that motive force.
But has it happened?
They suggest many recorded instances of levitation or flight were probably involuntary, resulting from extreme conditions like fasting, intense prayer, certain illnesses, or peculiar practices that temporarily made the person's psychic nature unusually light. Not necessarily conscious control.
Okay. And one last thing. Psychic intoxication. What's that?
This is a warning. It starts with an eager curiosity or earnest desire for psychic experiences before you've properly developed your inner senses or self-control. Getting involved in things like seances prematurely can create a craving, making the person, like confirmed drunkards, always wanting more phenomena, even while doubting it, ending up in a confused, unhealthy state of psychic intoxication.
A cautionary tale. Wow. Okay, that was quite a journey. A truly mind-bending deep dive into Harold Percival's cosmology. We've gone from the absolute base, spirit matter differentiating from substance.
Right, through those incredible descriptions of early races, crystal spheres, egg beings.
Then into the inner worlds, senses as elementals, thoughts as actual entities that build our destiny and karma.
Redefining heaven and hell as mental states, encountering elementals and various ghosts as active forces.
And finally, touching on the potential for human evolution into these states of Adepts, Master, Mahatma. It's a lot.
It really is a remarkably complete system, isn't it? Challenging for sure, but internally consistent from its own unique perspective. And the core message woven through it all seems to be this profound interconnectedness. Everything governed by law, universal law, karmic law. And the consistent emphasis is on the power of our inner life.
Our mind, thoughts, desires, senses.
Exactly. That inner world isn't just reacting, it's actively creating our external experience, our destiny, and determining our progress towards that ultimate goal. Consciousness.
So, for you, the listener, engaging with these ideas, however strange they might seem at first, offers this unique, cohesive framework. It really prompts you to maybe question some basic assumptions about reality, what it means to be human, what might be possible. It's a very different lens to look through.
Definitely. And maybe to leave you with one final thought to chew on, something that really builds on this material. Consider seriously the radical idea presented here that everything you see around you, all the forms, all the beings, animate, inanimate, aren't just out there independently.
But instead,
They are the imaging forth and the reflection into physical forms of the thoughts and desires of man. Your thoughts, my thoughts, collective thoughts. So what does that truly imply about the world you experience every single day and your own role, your own power as a thinking, desiring being within it?
A powerful question to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a truly extraordinary and challenging set of ideas. We hope it gave you plenty to think about. Reflect on what resonated, what surprised you, and what new questions it might spark for you.